I was called Ginger by Ndlozi, who is now out there. Oh, I think he's doing a good job. And I never took it badly. The only thing I never used to like is when people become too personal. And by the way, my grandmother had told me to leave home and go and find some other place where I can stay, where there's no law and order and respect and listening, because she felt like I had crossed the line. While she had wanted me to be at school and all, I had 2 children before I was 20. And there was one comrade there. I don't know whether he's still alive, because I didn't know them. We didn't know each other by name, by anything. We had never met. But there was one young man who cried all the way. From the time that we got into the sugar cane and we were going, and then the lightning and the rain and the everything, he was crying all the way. And it's more than an interview. It's really digging into you, because if by any chance one of the people who have joined the ANC being an enemy agent, if the ANC doesn't do that with precision, it means that information would then be sent back to the entire journey. So the ANC, Umkhonto weSizwe, very organized at that. In hindsight, I feel we could have done better. But again, we were just thrown into this, and we had people who had been in the conventional army all the time, oppressing us, killing us, doing all that. And I'm sure they had been preparing themselves better in as far as military and defense was concerned. I again had another child in Moscow. I don't know what was wrong with me and the children, and not studying and not paying attention to that. Of course, I completed, because his father, he came from Guyana.
Mashani, politically incorrect. You've asked for it. You asked for, let's get freedom fighters who are female, who participated in the dispensation of this ANC government, but they are exilees. Remember, we said we battled with the word exilees. Does it even exist? But comrades who came from exile, and we were very lucky. She honored us with a visit to the digital photography studio. So what I'm going to do is clean slate again, and please don't bully me on touching the phone. I'm touching the phone because it's my tool of work. This is where I manage my stuff. But as much as possible, I'm just gonna give it to her, and let's see where we go. I'm not gonna ask her who is she, where does she come from. But Comrade Zulu Dumela.
Yeah, Dumela lika intat.
Everything simple. Why and just about when were you convinced that I must participate in emancipation of our people? And maybe just do that journey, how you traverse through countries, why you ended up studying in Russia, and my hope is we'll get back to South Africa, and how is this the South Africa that you wanted? Because at the end, we want to discuss what are the hopes for female leaders.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I was convinced that I need to join the liberation struggle after 1976, when a group of young men and women lived in our home in Eswatini. My grandparents had been people who had worked in Johannesburg. My grandmother had been a domestic worker in Johannesburg, somewhere in Parktown. My grandfather was one that was moving from one place to the other in terms of work. And so they always used to tell us about the struggle, but not necessarily in terms of the struggle as the African National Congress, the PAC, or anything of that sort. they just used to talk to us about the difficulty of working in Johannesburg and being black, and hoping, especially my grandmother, and hoping that South Africa would be a place for everyone one day. So when 1976 happened, my grandmother, requested by the church, the Catholic Church, was requested to keep some of the students who left in 1976 to the neighboring countries, Botswana, Lesotho, Eswatini, Swaziland then, Eswatini today. The church, there was a bishop at the church who we all believe had something to do with the liberation struggle, but he was a bishop, and who many of us believed how he died. He was killed in a car accident or something of that sort. Had been requesting South African families to keep some of the young people who had crossed the border, because at that time, Eswatini did not have a refugee camp like some countries had refugee camps. Eswatini did not. And so when we had about 5 or 6 of those young people who lived in our home, and obviously they spoke about what had pushed them to participate in 1976. And my engagement with them made me feel, one of the reasons why we are here, for instance, that my grandparents who slugged it out in Johannesburg this much, and they couldn't point to a house in Johannesburg, they couldn't point to a place of their own in Johannesburg, was because of segregation, of apartheid, and the fact that black people were just bringing their labor to Johannesburg. The second event or incidences that made me to be convinced was because there were comrades who had been operating in Eswatini already by then. But I was not very conscious of them, of the ANC, of anything. I wasn't politically conscious to that extent of knowing that, maybe these are the things I need to do. But these comrades, especially one, Utemba, who had grown up in Eswatini, his family also, I think they came from either Springs or Germiston, somewhere there. They were operatives of the African National Congress underground. And the incidences that happened was him asking me to use our post box. And we were not so many families that had post boxes, but my grandmother had to have the post box because she had to receive letters from my grandfather, Umkhulu, who lived in my hostel. Umkhulu lived for more than 50 years, he lived in the hostels. The last hostel he lived was Denver Hostel. 1996 was the only time we went to fetch him out of a hostel for him to come and live with me in my new home. But going back to the incidences, when Themba asked me to use the post office, the post box, and I agreed. I was very ignorant of it all. I agreed he used the post box, and he used to receive telegrams. And every time I asked him, what are these things? Because they were coming quite often. And he would not tell me. And then I had a relationship with Themba. He became my boyfriend. I was young, but he was my boyfriend. Then one day I decided, no man, why am I receiving these telegrams and I'm not knowing what this is? I opened one, thinking that maybe it comes from a girlfriend, maybe. Kanti, there was nothing like that. I opened one. I couldn't read what was that. It was coded. And I when he asked me about a telegram, I said, no, I didn't receive any telegram. He panicked. in his panic, then I realized, no, the fact, maybe this thing, it was
very important.
Maybe it's very important. So when the next telegram came, I never opened it. I gave him the telegrams. Hey, I was to discover years later that those telegrams were telegrams that were communication between comrades inside the country and those that were outside working underground. I discovered that many, many years later when he went to Tanzania, and I got to Tanzania myself, and then I actually started understanding that when I got to Mozambique, after having decided to join the African National Congress. I wasn't pushed to join. I wasn't, I just thought it right to join the ANC, having heard what people are saying about the ANC and having heard about the opportunities and possibility of a South Africa that can be better. I joined the African National Congress. So the influence came, one, from my grandparents who consistently spoke about the pain of living in Johannesburg and working in Johannesburg. My grandmother deciding to leave Johannesburg and go back to KwaZulu-Natal and live in a place called Alkoksproet, Halkoko at that time. And then forced removals in that place where we lived. And then moving to Eswatini, and the involvement of my brother, who, by the way, joined the PAC, and the two of us, no conversation whatsoever. We didn't know. We knew my brother had gone somewhere, but we didn't know where. He just disappeared. And my grandparents were very worried about it. But then there was a man, Ubabu Mkwanazi, who used to do the recruitment for PAC, who then made my grandmother comfortable by letting her know that Haige, ingane yakho isihambile ijoine iPAC, sesimfake kwi-organization usezolwela iSouth Africa. Me at that time, I am completely ignorant of where my brother is, ignorant of why my brother left. I am at college at that time in Eswatini. I'm at a college for cooperatives. But these people who the church has asked for them to stay at our home are there at home. It's a twisted story in a way, because when they came to live at home, I already had 2 children that I got too early in my life, who my grandmother was taking care of. And by the way, my grandmother had told me to leave home and go and find some other place where I can stay, where there's no law and order and respect and listening, because she felt like I had crossed the line. While she had wanted me to be at school and all, I had 2 children before I was 20. And for her, that was unforgivable. However, I used to come home, sneak home, talk to everyone, and then I met the people that were now staying, the comrades who were now staying at our home, and I would meet with them outside of home. And I got used to them, the women in particular, and they explained to me the struggle. The other issue that really made me decide I want to now fully join the African National Congress was because when Solomon Mahlangu was arrested, at that time, I'm young, I'm still trying to find myself in this new space of struggle. I'm not fully engaged. There is Temba this side who's asking me to do certain things, including this one of the telegrams, who's not explaining to me, but then who later realized he needed to explain to me. So when he explained, I got to understand. So I was at college, and Solomon Mahlangu was arrested, that whole process, and then the comrades used to talk about it quietly. And then in my college, they started the discussion about, yeah, well, he is going to be hanged because he had also planned to come and kill people. Now, remember, these are just Swazi people who are with me at college, and then the family that I also lived with when my grandmother chased me away from home. That's another story for another day. When my grandmother chased me from home, a friend of mine came to my rescue and took me to go and live with their family in a place called Mahlangu. And they also came from South Africa. They came from Jimiston. So they understood the politics much more than I understood. So when in my school, one of the classmates said to me, yeah, he was going to be killed anyway because he had come. Can you imagine somebody coming with an AK-47? What was he going to do with that AK-47? He was going to use it to kill people. And we argued. That's the time that I thought to myself, no, something in me is saying there is something that needs to be done. And I started then being active slowly through Temba. Temba would tell me, the struggle is like this. People come and then they cross, they go to Mozambique, and then they go and they train and they come back, but not intensely. I was also very young. But that incident that happened in the college is one thing that also said to me, I think I understand why Solomon Mahlangu had to do what he had to do. I now even understand what my grandmother used to talk about the pain of working in Johannesburg. You couldn't imagine the streets. There's a street for white people, a street for black people. You just couldn't imagine that unless you lived here. And we didn't live in Johannesburg, so we didn't have that sense. And because we had gone to Eswatini and started schooling there, we didn't have the true picture of a life of a South African. Then I joined the African National Congress also because I think Swaziland, the king then, Sobhuza then, had enabled the African National Congress and the PAC to operate from there. They had received South Africans and opened the gates for South Africans to live and work there. So one day in the home where I stayed, it was a weekend, I remember very well. I had come from college and Beguno Gogo, quite an old Gogo there. Some police came looking for me. And when the police came, by that time I was a little bit conscious, which, hey, by the way, kukhona abantu ababoshwayo and all that. I climbed the tree. In that home, there's a tree. I climbed the tree and I was sitting up on the tree, and they were with Ugogo there. I was looking at them at the bottom. And when they left, I came down and I asked Ugogo, bafuna ban, what I bafuna when? And Ugogo na, she's not even thinking, or like. Then I realized, which things are not gonna be right for me. I knew by then that there is a house of the African National Congress called White House. I left that home and walked from Mahlangu to Manzini. It's a long distance. I walked and I got to a White House and I nganoka ngasho ukuthi hayi ngathi kune problem ngoba la ngihlala khona bekufika amaphoyisa engifuna. And then I stayed there. They kept me in, and then they asked me, kahle kahle ubani wena, yabona? And then I explained who I was, and dating mina nje lapha White House from home. It's about 5 kilometers away. So I explained to them ukuthi no kahle kahle mina ngilapha kaZulu kaKhoza. That's where I grew up, that's where I come from, but I had this drama with my grandmother who rightfully was fed up with my behavior and everything. And I think I want to join the African National Congress. Then they said, you have to write your biography. Sat down, wrote my biography over and over, and then they were worried about the fact that I've got children, and now I want to go. But at the same time, and by the way, at that time actually, I had received a scholarship. I was going to go and study in Italy, to go and study cooperatives through the college. But all that came to a stop. Because now I was afraid of being arrested, and then I was afraid. Comrades used to say, when you are arrested, you are taken to South Africa, and that's where you are taken, you are tortured. And I was like, but I don't know much. I don't even know what I would be tortured for, if anything. And they would say to me, the mere fact that you've been receiving, your post box has been used for receiving telegrams. You are the one who enabled Temba to receive those telegrams. And I had to keep that. Now I had to keep the key of the post box in my pocket because I didn't want anyone else to get those telegrams. Okay, fine. They agreed. I have to go. I don't know. They did their own analysis, whatever. And then they said to me, I have to leave Eswatini. And I stayed at White House and did some little bit of things because I was already at college. When I got there, they asked me what was I studying. I was saying I was doing commerce, I was doing administration, I was doing management, I was doing the study of cooperatives. So they asked me to do some administrative work while I was waiting for the time for me to leave. Now I'm just like that. I don't have my clothes, I don't have anything. And then they said, I can still go home to where I was. I can still go back to college. And they transported me. I went to college, got my clothes. I mean, at least I packed. Unlike many people. At least I did pack my bag. Yeah. I even had a radio with me. Mm-hmm. So I packed my bags, got into White House again. And then they said that my clothes will be transported separately from our travel. Huh. All that time, I'm not saying anything to my family. I'm not saying anything to my grandmother, my younger brother who was there, and my other two sisters who were there. I'm not saying, I'm not going home at all. Actually, they said I can't go home. I can't go and tell anybody. White House stayed until the time came for us to go because they explained to me that I won't go alone. We need others who have to cross because crossing to Mozambique, they told me from here you're gonna go to Mozambique. From Mozambique, the ANC will decide what happens with you when you are in Mozambique. This is way back, as you asked me, 1979. I stayed at the White House for a few weeks. And then there were others who arrived. Then there were about 4 or 5 of us. That's when they said, now you can go. They transported us from Manzini to Steki, a place called Steki. And that place till today is a place of sugarcane farming. So the car that took us dropped us in the night. The car that took us dropped us, and then we had to walk. I would never forget that day. It was raining, hard. It was lightning. And there were I think we were about 6 of us. And of course, I didn't know the people I was with, plus the person who's going to help us cross without crossing using the border. And there was one comrade there. Hey, I don't know whether he's still alive because I didn't know them. We didn't know each other by name, by anything. We had never met. But there was one young man who cried all the way. From the time that we got into the sugar cane and we were going, and then the lightning and the rain and the everything, he was crying all the way. And then we crossed into Mozambique, into a house which was a transit house for the ANC. Nothing happened on the way. We crossed very smoothly into Mozambique, and we stayed in that transit house for about 2 days, and then we were transported now normally in a car to Matola, which was another transit camp for the ANC. Matola was the place of decision. Where are you going to go to? Are you going to go to Umkhonto Wesizwe for military training, which means immediately going to Angola, or you choose to go to school? I think what made me decide to go to school was because I was coming out of college. And the opportunity for me to continue my studies was made possible because I made that choice. However, the influence of the choice also depended a lot on the matron at the time, the Ubabu Mapita at the time, and some other ANC people comrades who used to come, and then they would talk to us and tell us that the youngest, in fact, Bob Mapita just didn't want any of the young people to go to Angola. Umam Flo was our matron of the place. And the place was just a normal house with a garden and everything. We wake up in the morning, we do get the gardening, we clean, we do all those things, we cook for ourselves and all, but it's a transit camp. Obama Bida said to us, to the younger ones, South Africa would need people who are educated when it is free. You all can't go to MK. Yes, we know that we need people to push the struggle and put the fight more, but it would be good for the younger ones to go to school. If you come back from school and the struggle, MK is still there, you can go and join Umkhonto Wesizwe. And that's exactly what I did. And the other issue for me was my grandmother kept on coming into my mind, that my grandmother had done everything to keep us in school. I didn't grow up with my mother. I didn't grow up with my father because my father died when I was 11 years old. And my parents had never married. And my mother had left us in Ehalkoko with my grandmother because my father and mother had 3 children, me, my 2 brothers, very quickly before my mother was even 23 years old. And she was then taken to live with us and my grandmother, because my grandfather was always in Johannesburg. And my mother had a tough time with my grandmother, and my father was not there for my mother. He was there in accepting these are my children and all, in Taulo and all that, that's fine. But he wasn't there because he was also just as young. And then I thought, sure, what would my grandmother say if she was to hear that I had an opportunity to go to school and I didn't agree? And I had left the 2 children. And here I'm being told, when you come back, and if you come back and you had gone to school, your chances of being a better person are even bigger and greater. But the children, by the way, I had almost absolutely no, I don't know how to describe it. I was a child that had children. And so my feeling towards my children then was a completely different story. I knew I had children, but what it was, how it's supposed to be, what's supposed to be happening, don't ask me. But I had my grandmother, bless her soul, that did everything to make sure that those children, even at the time when she chased me away, the children were taken good care of. I decided to go to school. Again, there, when you get to, everywhere you go, every step you take, you write your biography. People must know that. Because today, people join the ANC willy-nilly anyhow, and that's why sometimes we have these problems of people who actually don't have a clue. Where did the ANC come from, and what did it do, and what sacrifices many people made, including death, for them to keep the African National Congress strong, to be able to confront the enemy. So I decided I'm going to go to school. Fast forward, I got into the aeroplane for the first time in my life, traveling from being transported from Mozambique to Tanzania to Solomon Mahlangu Freedom College. Now think about it. Solomon Mahlangu is one of the people who his arrest and his hanging had a little bit of impact in me thinking, why is this happening? Now, 1979, end of 1979, I'm finding myself in Tanzania, in a college that the ANC decided to call a Solomon Mahlangu Freedom College. Because I had already completed my studies and I was already at college, I was asked by the principal there, Utatu Njobe, because Utatu Njobe was the principal and the wife, Uma Njobe, was the matron of the school. Because I had done administration and management and all that and office work, he then asked me to work in the office of the school, Solomon Mahlangu Freedom College. I worked at the college while waiting for scholarship, because everyone who went to Solomon Mahlangu Freedom College, you had to, if you hadn't finished your matric or your O-level or your A-level, you had to complete and then wait to get scholarship. I got a scholarship. Maybe I might just make the point that most of us wanted to go to either to the US or to the UK or countries that we at least knew something about. Socialist countries we didn't know much about, unless in South Africa you had already been grown up and had been the underground comrades who used to have political discussions and they would talk about Marx and Engels and all that. We were not there at all. So I got the scholarship to go and study what I wanted to study. That was a good thing. We had a choice of what you want to study. And I had always wanted to do journalism. For some reason, I don't know. And I read a lot. Even when I was at school, I used to be one of those people who read novels. I read Mills and Boons. I read Enid Blyton. I finished them all, So I wanted to be a journalist because somehow I felt maybe I might be a writer. When I grow up, I might write my own novel or something of that sort. I got the scholarship to Moscow, Patrice Lumumba People's Friendship University, to study journalism, and we were quite a number of comrades doing different specialities. Some were studying law, some were doing medicine, some were doing oil engineering in Baku, especially the place where there's a lot of oil in Russia. They were studying. There were different specialities. Some were just doing pedagogy, for instance, those who wanted to be teachers, to teach the language and all that. But I had chosen journalism, and the university provided for journalism. I did my journalism. I started my year one, which is year one, you do more of the language than you do anything else, but you also do an introduction to your specialty. So I did the introduction to journalism, photography, everything that's related to journalism. The first year only I did in English. The rest of the years is nothing but Russian. You read, you write, you speak, you do your thesis, you do your exams, you do everything in Russian. Some made it, some didn't make it, and if you didn't make it, the Russians would just take you back to where you came from. The university was an international university. It still is there, and it is an international university. So for the first time, I was exposed to the world, because there you had students from African countries. You had students from Latin America. You had students from Greece. You had students from Asia. At that time, I didn't even know there was a country called Laos, for instance. And I was with students in the classroom. You had the Russians, and then you had the international students that were there. So that was the first time for me where I got to understand the world. I got to meet people of different backgrounds, different cultures, different practices, different beliefs, So that's what actually shaped my thinking towards international, where I can fast forward and say, coming back home and being in the legislature of Gauteng, I always wanted to do something related to international work. And I got the opportunity to do international work when I left the legislature to go and work with Usisi Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma as her special advisor on international relations. But go back now to completing my studies in Moscow, and I again had another child in Moscow. I don't know what was wrong with me and the children, and not studying and not paying attention to that. Of course, I completed, because his father, he came from Guyana. His father completed before me, but by the time he completed already, we were not in very good terms. So he took the child and went with the child to Guyana. And that understanding was that even if he had left the child with me, where was I going to go with the child anyway? And many people might have said, you could have gone to Mazimbe and all. But fast forward, I completed my studies. Then I came back to Tanzania, which was the rule or the practice by the ANC. Most of us who went to school either came from Lusaka, for those who lived in Lusaka, or in the main, we came from Tanzania, Solomon Mahlangu Freedom College, because most of us were there. And then I got to Mazimbu. I'm now a journalist. I started looking at what is it that I can do to practice my journalism here, because communication is communication. You create communication, and if there isn't anything, you start something. I thought of starting a newsletter in Mazimbu. Already there are some comrades who had done something around that, and I just at the time when I thought I'm getting it going, this thing of the newsletter, because having a newsletter means collecting the information from comrades here, others writing articles about why we are here and all that. Fortunately for me, I didn't stay in Tanzania for long, because I had already indicated I wrote the biography again. I had to write my biography again in Tanzania and explain why I wanted to go to join Umkhonto weSizwe. I did that very well, because if I hadn't done it well, they wouldn't have allowed me to go to Angola. I then was taken, a group again of us, not just me alone, who were taken from Tanzania, who were flown to Zambia. We stayed again in a transit camp house. It wasn't a camp, it was a house in Zambia. All the time that we are in the transit camp, we are doing things for ourselves. We are cleaning, we are cooking, we are attending political classes, consistently political classes. And then we are explained the structure of the African National Congress, the National Executive Committee, why that structure, the underground operation, why the underground operation. We are being prepared to go to Angola now to get beyond the political education now. the real thing.
Not new.
Yes, the real thing. How to use it, why you have to use it, when you have to use it. We stayed in that house, I think we stayed for about 2 or 3 weeks, somewhere there. We were then again flown out of Lusaka into Angola. The African National Congress, very organized, to the T. You travel 1979, the ANC, logistics, everything. You travel from Eswatini. Now, for me, it's from Eswatini. Imagine the others that were coming from home, getting there. Very organized, step by step, because the enemy, if it had an opportunity of catching anybody, you are caught, you are thrown into prison. So the ANC had to do everything with precision, military precision. And so even our travel from Eswatini to Mozambique, logistics, everything, food, where you're staying, where you're sleeping, flights from Mozambique to Dar es Salaam, from Dar es Salaam, transport from there to Morogoro. And then Morogoro, you then decide you are going to study in Moscow. Again, that's all like with precision. The day you are leaving to go to school, the clothes that you have to have, ask me where the clothes came from. We used to be given second-hand clothes by countries that were supporting us, Scandinavian countries, and then people even in the capitalist world. We had clothes from Spain, from UK, from the US. We had clothes that we could choose what we needed. And then you travel all with precision. Got to Angola, again in Angola with precision. We arrive, we are taken, processed through, we are taken to Matola, the transit camp. You stay there in the transit camp. I, unfortunately, and my group arrived at the worst of time for the ANC. So we stayed in the transit longer than most do. Because in the transit, again, you write your biography, you explain yourself, you are interviewed. It's not just about writing your biography, you are interviewed. And it's more than an interview. It's really digging into you, because if by any chance one of the people who have joined the ANC being an enemy agent, if the ANC doesn't do that with precision, it means that information would then be sent back to the entire journey. So the ANC, Umkhonto weSizwe, very organized at that time. And then I got to Angola, stayed in the camp. Why were we delayed in the camp? Was because that was at the height of UNITA rebels attacking our convoys in the travel from Luanda to the camps. And the camps were far, like more than 100 kilometers, probably almost 120, 30, 50 kilometers from Luanda to the camps. And we stayed there because the ANC, I think Umkhonto weSizwe leadership, had to make sure that when we are being transported and being what they call amacrusant, we are new, we are not trained. We have to be protected by those who are trained. If there's got to be a skirmish, a fight, we wouldn't be able to do anything because we know nothing about the guns. But the comrades who are around us, who are driving the cars, who are having the heavy machinery that faces even anti-air and all that, we are traveling from there all those kilometers to the camps. We traveled all those kilometers to the camps, and I got to the camp. I cried. Because I looked around and I asked myself, why did I bring myself here? Because when you are in Luanda, you don't see. You are told life in the camp, it's in the bush, it's no small time bush. You will think it's some, is the tallest trees that you can't imagine, is the shrubs, is the everything, and you get there and you are told you are received. First thing that happens when you are received, you arrive, you sleep, in the following morning they have to process you again, which therefore means your biography again. And now, beyond your biography, there's now the intelligence. The officers who are literally trained to dig out into you to just make sure that you've not been sent by anyone else to come here for any other reasons. Now, there's another long story that needs to be told another day, because the man I'm with today was the intelligence officer who interviewed me then. The man that I'm still with today is the man that interviewed me then. And by the way, at that time, when you are a trainee, officers are not allowed to have relations with new recruits. It's a punishable crime. So he interviewed me. Well, I guess in the process of the interviewing, he was looking and thinking otherwise. That's another story to be told another time, because then we started having the relationship later, and we almost grew with each other. We are still together today. But I finished my military training in a camp called Pango. That one is not the one, it wasn't for training you for long. That's the one that needed to train people quick in order to deploy them, either to the frontline states or back home. I think there was a plan somewhere where they said, lo ubuya eskolweni, sekathole some certain skills, maybe we should be quick in the training and then take her out. But something somewhere happened that I couldn't go. I wasn't deployed. I didn't even know at the time, because you're not told those things. You just follow. Then I was told, no, I have to go to the camp, the fully fledged camp, where I had to now do the fully fledged training. This is very exciting. Very, very exciting. Pango was small. We had a few comrades, and one of the comrades that I used to attend classes, well, it was just the two of us. And in that camp, there were only two women, myself and Martha, who comes from Bloemfontein. She's still there now in Bloemfontein. With all the men that were there, more than 100 men, the two of us were the only women there. And training in Pango, again, remember I said it was at the time when Savimbi's people, they used to try by all means to get into our camps, because I think their agreement, South African Defence Force and Savimbi, UNITA, the leader, there was probably an agreement that, you know what, help us to beat them while they are there before they come cause problems for us here in South Africa. So they attacked us on the way, and they tried to attack our camps, but boy, oh boy, they never made it into our camps. One incident that I saw was when they tried to enter Pango, where I was doing my military training, and they were hit by mines. One of them did manage to go as far as Santiago. Santiago, all the points where there were points of reference for us. So there was a place in Pango that was called Santiago. It is a little bit higher, and it is the one where you go on duty. In fact, all the places you go on duty, 24/7, we were on duty. There was one who managed, I don't know how he managed to get there, but all I heard was this big bang, and he it was the first time I saw a person dying in front of me. I was like, look, because the mine just cut his leg, and he was alive for a little while. And I think comrades were trying to keep him alive, because keep him alive also means getting information. How did you get there? But unfortunately, well, I don't know whether it's fortunate or unfortunate. He died. He came for the purpose, and the purpose was to find how we are situated for purposes of ensuring that they attack us later on. So fast forward, I did my military training. I completed my military training. Now, I was in the camp at the time when there was the conversations about the freedom of Namibia. And one of the conditions for the freedom of Namibia was the withdrawal of the Cuban forces, but the withdrawal also of Umkhonto we Sizwe. And I think many a times that's missed, that element of life, that we also had to leave Angola. And so O.R. Tambo, Chris Hani, all the leadership of the time needed to then go and have conversations with other leaders of the African continent. Where do we take all these soldiers to? And it's not only just soldiers, it's us and our equipment, because we need our equipment. And then we had the opportunity of going to Uganda, the opportunity of going to Tanzania in the main. Then the other opportunity obviously was infiltrating most of our comrades back home. But of course, at that time, the enemy was like at its height. At that time, that was like 87, 88, 89, somewhere there. And I stayed in Angola when comrades were being moved to other places, because Comrade Nosivuwe Mapisa Ngagula, together with Comrade Chris Hani, they agreed that I must go and work with the Pan-African Women's Organization, which was based in Angola. Its head office was Angola. Basis for them to say so was that because I'm a journalist by profession, comrades were always trying to see where can they push us for practice, for practical, for us to begin to understand to have some practicals on our work. So they said, well, you're a journalist, you've done communication, Pan-African Women's Organization is looking for someone that can start the unit related to communication for the organization. And remember, the organization is continental. So I had to work with them to start their communications unit and start the structure of internal communication for the organization, but also communicating out what this organization is all about. I stayed to do that, but at the same time, I used to go to the ANC's printing. The ANC had a printing press in Angola. I used to go there for the pamphlets and other things that they used to be preparing there to send them inside the country. So I used to go to the printing of the ANC just to see how it works. Then I left Angola, because now I think the ANC, the discussions about possibility of coming back home were now growing up. Remember 1986, the talks about talks in Dakar, in Senegal. So even the outside was slowly beginning to prepare itself to say, looks like we are going to be going back home. But if we are going back home, what does that mean? So those that were trained in specialties, whatever, they would be put in some places where they can be able to work. Then I was asked to leave Angola and go to Lusaka, because they asked me to join the ANC's Religious Affairs Department. Why that department? Because again, I'm a journalist. They wanted us to start a journal of religious affairs, put that journal together, get it printed in Angola, brought into Lusaka, taken to the frontline states, distributed inside the country. So we had a journal called Pagamani, but it was strictly focused on issues of religious affairs, what the ANC believes the religious community should do in support of the liberation struggle. And so I worked with some comrades. We lived, comrade, one of them was Comrade Ungushe, who used to be in the army, but he retired now. And he was the Mfundisi for the ANC. And I worked with them a little while. We produced that magazine. We were supported also by the World Council of Churches in terms of keeping the religion and those that are religious, feeding them with what they need, because, you know, they were religious. You couldn't take away that from them. Then fast forward, I was asked to then go to Uganda to go and work at the office in Uganda with Sis Tenjiwe Mtinzo, who is our current ambassador to Namibia now. And then my boyfriend then had been sent in the front line to go and prepare for the soldiers to come to Uganda. They were he was among those people who had to prepare the camps for the arrival of comrades. Then I went to Uganda. He happened to be in Uganda. We continued from where we left. And I stayed in Uganda from 1990, end of 1989, I think 1990, 91. I was among the comrades that came to South Africa for the conference, the first ANC conference. But prior to that, I can't remember the exact year that Umkhonto weSizwe also had its own conference in Puluko, not in I think it was in Polokwane or somewhere, Toyando or somewhere, I can't remember. So I also came for that conference. So I started coming to these conferences of the ANC, being either elected by the comrades that were there in any given structure to come and represent them. So I came to the first conference representing our camp in Uganda, and our chief rep then was Ubabuma Sondo, because Sistenji left, and then Ubabuma Sondo came, and I stayed there. I worked in the office of the ANC. Now, this was a formal diplomatic presentation of the ANC. I worked there as, again, I continued to do my work on communication for the African National Congress, but also I was enabled to join the Union of the Journalists in Uganda then, because Uganda was very supportive of us, and President Museveni in particular and his government were very supportive. Then I came back home in 1991 because everyone was now coming back at that time. I came back home 1991 to Shell House, and I was with the ANC Women's League. I worked with the Women's League. Again, I was there as a communicator, and we started a small newsletter called The Rock. And we produced The Rock. It was good. It was now a practical experience for me to experience what I had learned in the production. But I had always wanted to be somewhere, either on radio, production of programs, or TV production of program, not as anchors, but be on the back in the production of the programs, because I always felt that's where the propaganda, if you may call it that way, happens. That's where the shifting of the mindset of people happens. It happens there at the back, not the people who are reading. Unfortunately for them, sometimes they want to say certain things, but the back says, no, you're not going this way, you're going this way. So I was back then, and I worked with the Women's League. and I was among the spokespersons of the ANC towards 1994 elections, when President Nelson Mandela was being prepared for the first president and all. I was one of the spokespersons, together with Balega Mbete, together with Ronnie Mamweba, bless his soul, together with Paulo Jordan, and believe me, together with the Kalni House. We were the spokespersons. We had our offices in the Carlton Center, at the top of the Carlton Center. It's such a pain to see the Carlton Center looking like the way it looked today. It used to be a place where we used to go to. ANC had some offices there, and the communication. Of course, we had Shell House as the head office. And then, fast forward, we had elections. I was elected to the Gauteng Legislature, and I was there. I was a chair of chairpersons. The 1994, it was tough for us because we were not thrown into the deep end of government and governance and governing, having not had an experience. And by the way, if I can say, there had never been apartheid anywhere else where we could say, no, maybe let's go there and learn how they did it. We were the first to get it going. We were the first to amalgamate 9 countries, put them into one. We were the ones to amalgamate and make sure there's one Department of Defense, one Department of Education, one Department of Health, all those that were there, that were in the Bantustans, we had to bring them all together. And it wouldn't have been easy for us because not many of us had the opportunity of staying somewhere where people would say, we've seen the government of Uganda, we've seen the government of Tanzania, we've seen the government, this is how it works. We had seen it, but we had not been there to study it. So we knew there were governments, and I think it's the leadership in the main, and especially O.R. Tambo. And it was so unfortunate that by the time we came back, O.R. Tambo had a stroke. Why do I say that? I say that because if you go back into some of his writings and some of his speeches, that's where you pick up that he had been experiencing the governments of the African continent, and he had seen how some of them had gone wrong and forgotten that they had been there for the people, but they became leaders for themselves. And so the management, the administration became something that they were doing for themselves. Hence, even Chris Hani speaks about the Mercedes-Benzes and all that. If at the time that we were outside, we would have understood that we will get freedom very soon, we might have been able to take people, comrades then, to go into studying governance, studying the governments of the different countries where we were. I was in Uganda. It might have been a good thing to say, hey, Comrade Lindy, Comrade Mcebisi, Jonas, Comrade whatever, you guys have been to school, have been to university. Maybe because we are going back home, can we look at the form of government that we would want to see? Some did that, like Abo Comrade Tito Mboweni, Abo Trevor Manuel and all that. That's why you find that most of the time they were in the forefront. Abo Trevor Fowler, who was with us, who was our speaker in the legislature, they had at least a sense. But you know, when you have a sense and you are one or two, and you are leading a whole group of people who are MPs, who are MECs and all that, who have not had the opportunity, it's not that easy. That's why I keep saying to comrades, what we call the transition, we rushed it too much for me. We should have stretched that transition to enable ourselves to begin to understand governance and governing. Not a few people to understand that, but a critical mass of members of the ANC to understand that. And I think if we had done that, we would have understood that putting your best only in the main to national and provincial and leave local government and not put your best even at local government was going to be a problem for you. But then we were all practicing, we were all starting, we've learned our lessons, we've seen it now. So in the legislature of Gauteng, I became the speaker, the deputy speaker of the legislature when the Nationalist Party decided to get out of the government of national unity. Now we have the government of national unity now. So they got out, and then all the positions they were occupying had to be occupied by the African National Congress, because I think at that time the ANC was strong enough and had enough electoral support, and the percentage for us was quite high for us to be able to make the decision that we will then occupy those positions. I became the deputy speaker until 1999. I left the Gauteng Legislature because I had always been yearning for international relations. So I went to the Secretary General, then Comrade Khalima Motlanthe, to tell him that I'm not having a problem in the legislature, but I just feel I want to do this. I want to go to international relations. But also there are times when I used to say, yabona nayo lento ukuthi nje uzodependa whether they elect you or they don't elect you. Sometimes it's not pleasant. You understand? It's a fact. We must keep talking about it, thinking about it, because for many people who actually are also professionals and they've got opportunity somewhere else. And then when this thing in the ANC, you have factions, you've got people electing you not on the basis of your capacity, because they elect you because you belong there or you don't belong there. I just used to think, I wish we could elect people at all times on the basis of their capacity, capability, commitment, where possible. With their education is also very important. And education for me has always been important, because my grandmother could do anything to keep us in school. And she always used to say to us, we have to go to school because she doesn't want any one of us to ever be domestic workers. She doesn't want any one of us to ever go through what our grandfather went through, being selling labor here in Johannesburg. And by the time he retired, I was chasing my grandfather's pension, and they were telling me that after all these years that he's been here, the company that he worked for, now the last company he worked for, after all those years, his pension was going to be some miserable figure of about 12,000. You understand? So my grandmother knew why she was pushing on this thing of the education. And then also that time I said to myself, hey, I actually don't think, I respect the due processes, but I also don't like, now what must I do? I must keep on either belong to this or, but I don't want to be belonging to anything. I want to be a cadre of the organization, that people choose me because they can see of my commitment, my hard working, and my, more than anything else, my passion for serving the people. That's what should, So I explained to him that I wanted to go to Foreign Affairs, and I said to him, I will apply for a post in Foreign Affairs when the opportunity presents itself. And then he was saying, but have you looked at the structures of, I said, I have, there's directors, chief directors and all that. And then I said, I know that I'm in the legislature, I'm a deputy speaker, so I'm at that level, but that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for going in there. Then he spoke to Sis Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, who also understood. Sis Nkosazana knew me as a child of the ANC. I met her for the first time when we came back. We never met outside in exile. I was with her in the National Executive Committee of the Women's League, because I was among the young women of the, and then she had seen me. And she really liked the idea of me saying I want to go there. Then she said, oh, you don't even have to wait for applying, because I think she also liked the fact that I was saying, I'm going to apply. Sis Nkosazana is straightforward. Her things move straight. The fact that I had said I was going to apply, whatever, must have said to her, no, she really wants to come through. So she appointed me as her advisor. on international relations, because I qualified also for that. I had my master's degree. I was a journalist by profession, and I had done some little bit of work here and there that's related to international. I had been exposed to international work in Uganda, working with Usistenjiwe Mtinzo, in the office, because she was the chief rep. So I had been exposed to going to embassies, talking to ambassadors and all that. I had been exposed to that. So I was appointed, and I was there with her for that appointment. But then I also had the conversation to say, being an advisor and being in the department are two different things. I learned that when I got there, that when you are an advisor, you are not deep. Sometimes some officials, they want you to be there. Sometimes they don't, because sometimes they feel you become too much for them. Then I asked also that, because I'd like to get into the department, I will apply to get, and she said, fine. I applied for a post when it was advertised, Chief Director, Western Central Africa. I applied, I went through interviews and all, and I got the post. Then I left her and went into the department to be Chief Director, Western Central Africa. And I was responsible for about 27 countries of the African continent. That was one of the best of my time, because then I learned, then I started developing good networks. I started understanding the African politics, not from reading, but from physically, because I had been going with her also to some countries. Now that I was responsible for these countries, it made it easy for me to do the work. Then I was with her then I was in the department. I was part of the team that did Sun City talks and all that. That really took a lot of our energy and my energy. But prior to that, I had also been with Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma when we were assisting in the Burundi peace process, the Cote d'Ivoire peace process. So by the time I got to being a chief director, at least I had gotten something there. Then somewhere along the line, I thought, I need a bit of a break. Can I go see what other people are doing somewhere else? And I got an opportunity to work for Vodacom. I was working with Vodacom, again, focused on, because Vodacom is a company that needed to get contracts in the African continent, and I had done the African continent.
Networks.
I had the networks, and one of the things that I did, and I still feel very good about, was when I was at Vodacom, Vodacom somehow felt that when the peace agreement was signed, that would enable them to go to the entire country, and it proved to not to be. And I knew at the time that the fact that there's a signing of an agreement between the parties in the DRC, in South Africa, the Pretoria Minute, doesn't mean that anybody can go anywhere in the continent. But it was good. Vodacom sent me when they had a problem, particularly in Goma. Fast forward that Goma. I went to Goma because the governor and them, they had captured the Vodacom equipment. That base station thing, that thing is very costly. I went there to facilitate, negotiate and everything, and we got the equipment back, and Vodacom started operating actually in Goma at the time. While I was in the department, while I was at Vodacom, I got a call to say government needs you to come back. Like, come back? I'm so fine here. Government is very stressful, to be honest with you. The hours you put in there and the challenges that you face in there, it's really, really not easy. But we do it in the best way we can. So I was asked to go and be ambassador of South Africa to Brazil. And again, when the call came, I was sitting there with my husband. We were just having coffee in the afternoon. We were at Village Walk. When Village Walk used to be that small Village Walk, not what it was, and I got the call. I was like, let me think about this. But the thought of going to Brazil was very exciting. I said, this is a very unfair proposal. And then I thought, well, I haven't been to Vodacom for long. What must I do? Well, I said, I'll bite the bullet. I want to go to Brazil. I want to be an ambassador. Again, it's expanding my horizon on international relations. And I've seen what potential it is when you are an ambassador and you have to talk about your country. You have to build the relationship between your country and that country. You have to look at economic opportunities between those countries. So I agreed. I said I will go. I went to Vodacom. I informed them. They were very gracious about it. They didn't cause any dramas or anything. They just said to me, look, you enjoy being in government. Even you being in Brazil is also good for South African companies. So with pleasure, we'll release you, we'll let you go. And I went to Brazil. I stayed for 5 years almost. And then came the time for the Limpopo conference, and I was like, no, I don't think I want, I'm fine now. I think I can be in Brazil and then I can go to another country. And the Women's League, through Comrade Batabile Dlamini, said to me, Comrade Lindy, the women need strong women. The Women's League needs comrades with a good background of education, of experience, and of your caliber and all. We want you to stand. And I said, but I'm in Brazil. But they said, but you're coming back. So you can stand. We want you here. Then I agreed. Then I stood. Then of course I made it to the National Executive Committee. Fortunately, it was towards the time that I was also rounding up in Brazil. I came back, went back to communications in Luthuli House, and I was a full-time worker in Luthuli, not because of being national executive or no, but just working with the Department of Information and Publicity of the ANC. Then I was, of course, elected back, not now in Gauteng, but elected to National Assembly. That was 2009, I think. And then, just as I was starting there, President Zuma said to me, I think I need to have a conversation with you and some other comrades, because his office now being in the Union Building and all that will also need cadres that he know the work and would do the job right. Then I was appointed as his advisor on international relations. You know, at the time I was appointed by him, there was like, she was an advisor to Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. Now she's advisor to, and I can tell you, those two things had nothing to do with each other. Absolutely nothing. I think because I had shown my capacity at international relations, President Zuma, I don't even think he thought about my having been an advisor to Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma or anything of that sort. So it was just people talking on the side, and I couldn't care a damn about their talk on the side. I had a job to do. And I was with President Zuma the whole 5 years, being his advisor. And there's a lot that I learned. I was exposed yet again, particularly to the African continent, because I wanted very much to focus on the African continent. Europe was there. What was new in Europe? Nothing. What was new in America? Asia, yes, but Africa for me was the spot, and especially the institutions such as the OAU, the AU, and those were the places where I thought my experience of the African continent and the life I have lived in the African continent and the opportunity to contribute towards changing the approach of the leadership to always be focused on doing things for its people. That was the drive that I had, and I think I was with him, and we worked very well at the time. Then again, I was elected back to, because I was a member of the National Executive Committee. Then I was elected back into the National Executive Committee. And then I was elected back into Parliament again in 2014. That's when I was then given the responsibility of being Minister of Small and Medium Enterprises. And wow, I enjoyed that work. Why did I enjoy that work? Is because I had lived in the African continent. I had seen what small and medium enterprises do to create jobs for people. I had seen how Africans many do not even depend that much on government. They wake up in the morning and they do sell whatever they are able to sell because the environment is enabling for them to do so. So I thought South Africa was overly regularized. South Africa was monopolized too much. It didn't enable small and medium enterprises to just wake up in the morning and say, "Angiyosebenzela muntu. I'm going to go and sell these magwinya," but the environment is created for them to do that. Or I'm going to start a factory of production of something, and the environment is created for them. And I worked very well with the organizations that had been calling for the Ministry of Small and Medium Enterprises. But again, politics, I finished my 5 years, and I didn't take it for granted that I would go back, because it doesn't work that way. But I did go back, and then unfortunately I couldn't go back to small and medium enterprises, but that's okay. And then I was appointed as Minister of Social Development. That was also a very, very exciting for me, because I felt, being a Minister of Small Business Development, there's an opportunity even at social development to direct some people into thinking about small and medium enterprises and informal business, so that even when they get the little that they get from government, they could build on it. Yes, some of them are old, they are pensioners, but people go into pension at 60. And quite frankly, for me, at 60, there's still something that you can be able to do if the environment is being created for you. That was my last in government, and I am out of government now. But serving the people of South Africa, for me, is not always about being in government.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to do this. I stood back deliberately and I wrote questions based on what you told us.
Yeah.
Actually, this is what you want, guys. I stood back. So here are the things. One thing for me is, I heard you many times mentioning communication. So I'm a communicator myself, and you said communication. And what I loved about it, you didn't say communications, you said communication. That tells me that this is a true communicator. You are a trained communicator. There's a difference of those who call it with an S and those who call it with an S, and you are the best version of that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So the MK story, the ANC story in exile, what we call Koma. Koma is in
Yes.
We are told, and the expectation is, once you go there, when you come back, you don't talk about the thing that you go there, and then people are called, if you do that, if you speak about the things that happened there, and then they call you umdwembe. I just want to understand. I've got questions that I wrote here. The question that you think you're not going to answer, it's okay. I just want to understand. I'm going to throw a few questions from what I've got here. And then, like I say, if you want to answer, you will. Just keep it short, because I want to release you. You're going to an AIDS engagement. There's a famous picture of you. And you were lying or holding a book, and there's a picture of you with AK, and you've been associated with this. And you seem to be like the only, even though you're not the only one who struggled, you are only one with seen as, with military fatigue. You are seen as that. In short, just explain why you were tied in that picture, what had happened in the day, in short, just so.
Oh, that day was one of the most difficult days because we had been traveling from Kampala to the camps, and our car broke down on the way, and we were like almost 40 or so kilometers away from the camp, and the car broke down, and then we had to walk all that way to the camp, and we were walking in a hostile area. Fortunately, part of the road towards there was a camp of Uganda there, Ugandan soldiers and all. To arrive there and be received there when we are not known is also a danger zone. But they received us because they knew that MKK does always pass by car there. They kept us there just for about an hour or so, and then they said to us, we have to leave and we have to walk. That picture was taken after that long walk. The sun had burnt me. You can see my skin, I was burnt. And then when I got to the camp, obviously when you get to the camp after some disaster like that, you have to answer for yourselves. How did this happen? Because it could have put you in danger. It could have put the comrades also in danger in the camp. But they understood. And because I wasn't one who lived in the camp, I think the people who suffered for it most were the soldiers who were in fatigue and all. Me, I was a soldier, yes, but I was in a civilian space. And so when I got there, I was waiting to hear what was going to be said to them. And maybe I was going to be called to be asked, how did this happen? So I was sitting there in that, because we had dwellings, what we call dwellings. There were a few houses there, but funny houses, but there were dwellings where we dug and lived in them. So that photo was taken by my husband, who was not my husband then, was just a boyfriend. And because I was allowed the camera at the time, I'm the one that used to take the pictures. But even taking the pictures was very specific. We couldn't take pictures anyhow. So I asked him to take that picture. And at the time, actually, I wasn't even seeing that the AK, the folding part was next to me for some reason. It was later when I went printing that, oh, this was his AK, the folding part, because it was the commanders that carried the small ones that are folding. Us, we carried the long ones. So that photo was taken on that day because I wasn't very happy with myself. I was very scared. I was still waiting to hear whether there was going to be punishment for what had happened to us. And as you remember, I said earlier on, I used to read every little corner where I found some. That book, you can't see it, but I remember that book. It's a Russian book, Anna Karenina, which I read in Russian. And now the book was there in the camp in English. That's the book I was reading at the time.
Thank you very much. Your story, of course, the crossing and being educated in Swaziland, almost similar to Comrade TZ Tamizulu.
Yes.
It was Tamizulu's parents were educated, headmasters and stuff, and they took a decision to school him in Swaziland. And then this is where he got this orientation, almost similar like you. In short, the reason I want you to answer in short is because we've got a lot of questions for you to answer, and apologies because I'm going to cut it because I need to release it. What are your memories of Uzulu, even if it's narrative heard from secondary people and stuff?
Well, I never met him. And the thing is, you remember also once you get to MK, you use different names.
Yes.
So the Zulu was not even an issue at the time because my name was Nomzeheu. That was the name that was given to me. So I never met him, but I heard of him. Yes. I heard of his intellectual capacity. I heard of his commitment and all that. I heard of him, but I heard of him quite late because remember, I went to school.
Yes.
I went to varsity before I went into MK. And also my time within MK never enabled me to do any form of operation where I could have come across him or could have come. I just didn't hear much about him except for, of course, what we heard later on about how he died and how that was never explained, which is was very unfortunate, but personally, I just had no connection whatsoever.
Thank you. So he's regarded as like the most charming. Ronika says say he was very handsome, and the intellect, of course. I think a lot of people loved it.
I think in the main, for us, for those of us who heard about him, it was more about his intellectual capacity of being able to do analysis and all that. Yeah, we all heard about him.
Yes,
yeah.
and because of his, and they said a lot of people started seeing him as a rival. There's an issue here of him being liked by what people called the Xhosas at the time, the Xhosa Nostra thing. It came back when you guys were back in government, and there was a unit called Mbogoto. This Mbogoto was mainly in KZN, and Jacob Zuma alleged to be one of those who were running Mbogoto. Was Mbogoto under the, operatives under MK, or it was just a separate thing?
There couldn't have been anything operating outside of Umkhonto we Sizwe.
Okay.
Remember, I said to you, my experience of the ANC and my experience of Umkhonto we Sizwe was very organized. Not without fault.
Yes, of course.
No. Was very organized, because my experience of it throughout, every step that I took and every place that I was brought into, I saw organization. Obviously, when you are a trainee, we are arriving, you don't know what happens somewhere, some other places. I don't think there could have been anything outside of Umkhonto we Sizwe allowed. All units that were there had to be units that were under Umkhonto we Sizwe. I see that there's some comrades who have written a number of books, and I think that it's important for us to go into those books and get to go into the inside, because I think a lot of operations, the story hasn't been really told, because you speak about Mbogoto. What did you say?
Mbogoto, because they put it versus the tribalism, because it was mainly based in KwaZulu-Natal. Tami coming from from Soweto. Jacob Zuma, one of the things, he was not happy with him being appointed to be a regional leader, the commander in KwaZulu-Natal, because he's Soweto and he's not Zulu.
Look, those issues of who holds which command, which operation, where, dependent a lot on the analysis by the backroom, if I can call it that. Those people who used to be in Lusaka, especially, because the Umkhonto we Sizwe, if I may say, operations of the head office that used to deal with that was in Lusaka, at the head office of the ANC. And so the dynamics also could not be lost, including the issues of tribalism. It couldn't be lost. It was bound to happen, because first and foremost, you're bringing people who have structurally been separated like that, to be told that wena umXhosa so kufuneka uhlale this way, wena umZulu ufuneka uhlale wena umSotho, even in Soweto itself. But the good thing about the African National Congress, I think, in my experience, was fighting tribalism in the best way that it could.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to hop in all of
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Snooki Sigalala. It just came into my mind when you spoke about the editorial work that you did, and as a practitioner. Snooki Sigalala at some point led as an editor, of course, in propaganda missionary. Was it a position that you craved? Did you want to go into that space of maybe?
No, I think we all come from different backgrounds, and therefore our actions sometimes are usually shaped by where we come from. For me, leadership and being in position was never something that I even deliberately thought I want to be it. I want to be that. Yes. Not me.
Okay.
I never got. In fact, leadership for me came because of the way I carried myself because of the things I did that made those that needed to choose a leader to choose me. Because even in Moscow, when I was a student at an international university. But somehow, somewhere, even there, when it was about women who are vocal, I would be chosen to do that. Same thing when I came back into South Africa. My being in the National Executive Committee of the Women's League, there is absolutely nothing that I did belonging to this or that in order for me to be put in that position. It has always been just comrades appreciating my capacity, my capability, and saying she's among those that can be able to push the revolution next and push it next.
Thank you very much. And you've painted a clear picture of how beautiful meritocracy could actually help us. Valmansdal integration or Valmansdal process of forming one unit. Was it comrades being brought into SANDF, or was it SANDF collapsing because it had a previous name because when it changed? What are your feelings about it? Because every freedom fighter that I talk to has a feeling about the process of Valmansdal. What's your feeling about it?
I think we could have done it a bit differently, quite frankly, in my view. But remember, I said earlier on, we had no script to learn from.
Yes.
Other than what we found. I think for our cadres of Umkhonto weSizwe, we could have done better considering these 2 points I'm going to mention. One, being a liberation movement and a liberation army is very different from being in a conventional army. Being in a liberation movement, you could even have one eye or one leg or whatever. You could still be useful in a liberation movement. There are certain qualities that are very general for a liberation movement and a liberation army, because the usage of the comrades or your army there demands are very, very different. You know, to be one that is carrying equipment in underground, you don't necessarily need to have all your limbs. You might even carry it with a few because it's all done underground and it's not conventional. Conventional army, the demands of being in a convention army, the categorization of what you must be is very different. So we came back from exile with a lot of comrades who could not necessarily fit in automatically into a convention army. However, our plans for what to do with those comrades, I think in hindsight, I feel we could have done better. But again, we were just thrown into this, and we had people who had been in the conventional army all the time, oppressing us, killing us, doing all that. And I'm sure they had been preparing themselves better in as far as military and defense was concerned for the integration. So that's why today we still have a cry from the comrades who are former MK cadres, who are at home, some of whom are dying with almost nothing. It's a shame on us, and I think we should have done it better. I still think there's still time for us to do even better today, considering that many of them also have got children now.
Thank you very much. A short one as well. Who do you think won Cuto Carnival?
The people of Angola, first and foremost. Because remember, people who are from outside fighting someone else inside who you have brought in because you understand why they are there, you are also affected. Angola was affected because it had to give us the places for training. Angola had to give us even the equipment. More than anything else, Angola had to protect us. MPLA had to protect us from air, from ground and all. But however, they never were with us in terms of like when we're moving from the camps to from Luanda to the camps, they were not with us because we needed to carry ourselves there. So Cuito Carnaval was won first and foremost by the people of Angola because the wars that had been going on, that had even been killing their own people, came to an end. We, of course, together with SWAPO in particular, can say we are the victors because what we had been dying for, crying for, came to an end. The war somehow, not entirely, came to an end because remember, Angola continued because they also had their own civil war that continued for quite a while.
Thank you. Lots and lots of dossiers, lots and lots of maybe, content was mined by the African National Congress for many years, including those biographies.
Yes.
The physical files, you've got archives? Have those archives been digitalized? Is it classified? Is it available? The African National Congress is the oldest liberation movement, amongst the best in the world. And the institution that is the ANC itself, it's a mark, I say it a lot in this podcast, that it's a mark with which we benchmark all other political parties with. When we say a branch, we're talking in the sense of ANC. When we say the zone, everything ANC, it's 100 years old, we mark with it. But what happens to this rich history of the ANC? You've got physical archives. Are you going to digitalize them? What happened? Do people ban these things when they were coming back in the country? Where are they?
Firstly, I must thank you for giving me this opportunity because you are giving this opportunity to me as a person, but I'm here because of the African National Congress.
True.
So what I have offloaded to you should be something that must be kept for generations to come. I'll start there. Secondly, some of the files are still there, but some of them, I remember there was something in Lutuli House where they said there was a fire or something of that sort. I'm just hoping that some of that fire did not destroy anything that was there. Some of the information still sits in some of the countries where we were. And the African National Congress started now archiving this. Hence, the ANC, the person who actually was the first chairperson of the archiving committee, I think it was Comrade Balegambete. There is a structure now of the ANC that is doing that work. Unfortunately for it, that structure needs a lot of resources. And when we don't have resources, it becomes very difficult because it means people must travel from here to Swaziland and stay in Swaziland for a while, go to the families that kept some of our soldiers. And I'm happy that there is one family, the Masilela family, that started something called 42 on Triloni. There is the history of the parents of the Masilelas who kept some information, but a lot of it is through word of mouth. And I think this is the time not only for the African National Congress, but for the people of South Africa to appreciate that history and support the archiving of that information, both at the level of the African National Congress as an organization, liberation movement, but also government, because that history is not just a history for the ANC, in my view. It is a history for our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren. You know, the pain of traveling to China, example, and you go to places, they show you 4,000 years ago history.
True.
I came back from there and I said to myself, people who ask me about our journey, I will go and tell it. Because if I don't tell it, 100 years from now, those children will be asking, those people, how come they didn't talk? How come they didn't tell? Because I'm talking to you today. I'm also hoping, and thank you for your podcast, I'm also hoping that some other things would develop out of the podcast.
Thank you.
There are questions that are going to be asked. Who were the people who crossed with me? Are they still alive? Can we talk to them? There are questions that can be asked. Who was managing the office, the White House, as it used to be called? Are there some of the comrades still alive? I'm sure there are people who are alive. Comrade Kepuza, the former Minister of Defense, he used to go in that White House. Actually, he was known to be among the people who manage the process thereof. He's still alive. Can he be asked?
Tell them who's Kepuza.
That is Sipiwe Nyanda.
Thank you.
Comrade Sipiwe Nyanda.
Thank you.
He's still alive. He was ambassador in Mozambique. Can people ask him, how did it feel for him to have been operating underground between South Africa, Swaziland, Mozambique, and now, so many years later, he goes and he is the High Commissioner of the country.
He knows that area like a palm of his hand.
Oh, exactly.
You were. I think 2 weeks back you were at the liberation struggle engagement. Yes. I just want to ask you, because you speak about how our kids will not know certain things, and thank you for honoring us by coming. Why do you think people hate the African National Congress so much? This liberation movement, people, they don't know what you guys went through, but the level of hate is so much. You spoke about the meritocracies. You spoke about people going to study oil engineering. Meritocracy, I mean, you were capacitated. Do you think people are disappointed because you had more to give as the African National Congress and you under-delivered, or they just hate you because of you delivered democracy? Everyone now is free, can form any political party, and my business is just to point the wrongs of the ANC, and I'll be elevated because people. What do you think? Because you are not the only liberation movement that's seeing flames now in South Africa. And I remember there was a time it was saying in 25 years ANC will fall. Yes. So just tell me,
but
why do you think? Yeah,
the very people who started talking about 30 years the ANC would fall, that's a discussion for another time, because you ask yourself the question, why should people be predicting instead of assisting us to stand strong, not only just as a liberation movement, but as a country? The Liberation Movement Summit that took place, it took place because we of the liberation movements decided, if we don't talk to each other, if we don't share our experiences, if we don't share the good practices among the things that we have done and get rid of the bad practices, then we are going to sink as liberation movements. Hence, this meeting, the International Relations Subcommittee of the ANC, as led by Comrade Nomvula Mokonyane, said, 20 years we have not met. It doesn't make sense. It's not good. It's not good also for us as African in general, because we are under pressure as Africa. If Africa doesn't realize that if we are not united as Africans and we don't fix our things in our own homes, somebody will come from somewhere and override us. Actually, I was just saying, if those that colonized us in the past want to colonize us in a different way, what is it that we have that we can use to defend ourselves? And Comrade Nkosazana answered me in that when I said, he says, Lindy, unity. If Africans are not united and they keep on pulling each other side, this side, and somebody will come and just take over them. Now, I don't think people hate the ANC. I think people are terribly unhappy with some things which we do. Corruption, poor service delivery, infights, factions, not communicating what we have been able to do and show so that they themselves can speak for us. I don't think people hate the ANC. They are terribly unhappy with some of the behaviors of some of our own. who forget that we are here because we are supposed to serve people, not ourselves. Here I am, I'm out of government. I'm not going to moan and groan about it and say, oh, now that I'm out of government, I'm no longer a minister, I'm going to sit back and not do anything. Hell no. I will continue to serve the people of South Africa in the best way that I can, wherever I am, being in of government or out of government. People are also not happy about how the ANC itself manages itself. So that's where we need to focus on. How do we manage ourselves as the African National Congress? Not only at national, because managing ourselves is about how do you manage the branch. If you say, Amandla Asemasebeni, are you actually allowing that branch? Are you enabling that branch? Or are you going to that branch to say to the branch, no guys, it's better for us to appoint, to elect that one. You know, in the ANC branches in the past, when you stand up to nominate somebody, you would motivate why you are doing that. These days, there's no motivation.
They don't even know who they are. They're just given a list.
These days, this is what people don't like. They don't hate the organization. They hate the deeds of some of the members of the organization.
Thank you. This is the last one. Baro unale character ya Puma Silwa. So in Parliament, we were once asked, or when you said you will call me that outside, they said, so if muthu nkakile kontle no tla motshwara na, and you said of course ne ke tla motshwara. What is the reference of the ginger haircut, and were you friendly with the people who called you ginger outside Parliament?
We were very friendly. Yeah. Look, I think once you are a nation and you cannot relate to each other properly, there's a problem. You will relate to each other in that feisty way, in that fire way, in a particular environment that is demanding of you to be that feisty. But as human beings and as people, we need to always find each other. And I can tell you, I had big fights with the EFF, but I had the biggest dislike for members of the DA. Fact. And despite that, when we met in places where we were not in that environment of trying to convince
each other,
not even each other, trying to convince the outside who actually has the power, who has the experience, who understand the needs of the people. We talk to each other very well. I was called Ginger by Ndlozi, who is now out there. Oh, I think he's doing a good job. And I never took it badly. The only thing I never used to like is when people become too personal on people. I still don't like it even today. When people become so crude and so disrespectful, I still don't like it even today. And I don't care from which angle it comes, because even from the ANC side, those of us who would be like fighting, when it came to caucus, they would tell you, there's a limit to which you can go. And I was one of those who was told, Comrade Lindiwe, your anger must not cloud your judgment.
Thank you.
Yes.
The last one, you made mention of the original GNU. And I want you to compare with this GNU in a very short way. Are you happy? Because the African National Congress now seems to even invite more people, more players into this GNU. What are your feelings in comparison with the initial GNU?
Well, the initial GNU, as you recall, as you remember, I said I became a deputy speaker. The environment and the conditions and the politics of the time were very different to the politics of today. When that happened, the Nationalist Party took a firm decision and they were not wishy-washy about it. They didn't say, oh, we have a little bit of this, so we'll stay. No, they just said, we don't like what's happening, we're out of it. Cut. They cut. What I don't like about now, by the way, I did say right from the beginning, I think I need counseling about this GNU story. And I did get the counseling, because once the African National Congress National Executive Committee took a particular decision after discussion, even though I do feel like I wish we could have stressed the discussion a little bit more. Once that decision was made, I was not going to be going out and telling people, oh, me. I needed to follow the decisions of the National Executive Committee because I was part of it. I can't exclude myself. I was part of it. Whether I was happy or unhappy was no longer the issue. The issue was that this was the decision that we had made. What irritated me most was having agreed, having developed a not terms of reference or statement of intent, having agreed that this is how we're going to go. One party decides consistently it is going to be seen to be undermining what was agreed upon. Take the budget, for instance. I keep asking the question, why did we have to be in the space we're in February when budget processes are long? So if there wasn't an agreement, why did we have to be calling the whole parliament to sit knowing perfectly well that we are not in one here? Because I think that was a waste of time, waste of resources, waste of energy, waste of a whole lot of things. They should have just said, we have a problem here. We are not going to go to that parliament. Now, what was also, I was not happy with, I was seeing that you have the ANC as my organization doing its best to really keep this unity. But you've got the others who are saying, this is our time now to work on you to get to where we want to get to. So why be in a government of national unity? I've been in processes of government of unity. Zimbabwe, I was there for the GPA. I was there for the DRC. I know that once something has been signed and has been agreed upon, it's not to say you'll always agree, but critical issues, special issues that have got greater impact on people.
Laws to manage disagreements. Are you, in short, and this is the last one, does it pain you that SACP wants out?
Oh, it does. It does. It pained me right from the beginning when this whole thing started. Even though at some point I used to feel why. I used to see some of the things that some of our comrades are doing, corruption, all those things. I used to feel, but we are not doing ourselves a favor. And some people like the SACP will feel bad about those things, because when some members of the ANC are like, front pages for this or that. Not that I was thinking we're a perfect organization, we're a perfect nation. I know that in transition you'll have to go through this. But there are certain things that used to make me feel, kodwa nathi, some of the things that we do, they push people to some positions. Like you are saying, people hate the ANC, and I say, no, I don't think they hate the ANC. But there are things that make people to be so angry over what the ANC is doing. We don't agree. I never agreed with the position they took, quite frankly. I always thought, actually, I've always thought the Communist Party should be even above the African National Congress when it comes to ideological issues. Because I know when we were in exile that many a times they used to say the Communist Party's capacity to be part of the liberation movement, part of the alliance, but with their intellectual capacity and all that. And I went to school in Moscow, remember? It was during the time of socialism at the time, and I could see a lot of good things happening here, and I was wishing these good things must happen in South Africa. So while I don't agree with their decision, as the ANC has actually expressed this in the press briefing yesterday, even that we don't agree with the decision they took, we should have given ourselves time to engage, because, by the way, their task is that of socialism. They should be looking at this national development, this national, this NDR. They should be national development, what am I saying?
National Democratic
Revolution, yes, I'm wanting to come to that. They should be looking at it as a stepping stone towards that socialism. So if they are here and it's being killed now, how long is it going to take them now to get to their next step of socialism and ultimately to communism? Because socialism is a step to communism.
Sure.
So if this is killed now and we are not in charge, I just think that the decision is not right. I still think that there could have been better ways of dealing with what they are not happy with in as far as the ANC is concerned. In the main, they're not happy with the ANC from a point of view of service delivery. When it comes to policy, when it comes to development of papers and where to go and all that, I don't think they are unhappy there. They might not be happy with some issues, areas that are related to workers, you know, and what the policies that we have around workers and capitalism. They might not be happy with our approach to some things. They feel like we give in too much. That's fine. But however, this decision is not good neither for them nor for us.
Thank you very much. Mashian is politically correct. Let me let her go up. I've held for far too long. Each other. Those questions that you have that I could not ask her, it is because of time. Like I keep saying, at least our level like she came. Tada.